Itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and Poker Face will play with you today.
Do you enjoy violence? Do you enjoy somebody drawing violent scenes? It's its own unique thing. Here's the thing about Red Room. Ed Piskors Red Room. I'm a total mark for art that speaks to me. And art that speaks to me is something unique. You know, as I've said before, or I will say in the future, art that is unique is what really turns me on. Because you need to find a way these days to stand out, to draw a crowd. You know, you can't just be an amazing artist and then that's it. Like, you're done. The thing about Red Room is Ed Piskor does that. I'm slamming it down. Listen here, brother. I need to tell you how to do some Red Room art. Here's the thing. Ed stands out because he did something new. Well, it's not really new. It's just something from the past that feels new. You can't actually find duotone these days. Duotone is something that you get a piece of paper. On that paper, you would use a little dab of magic dust, and it would create an effect. The effect was lines going one way or the other way to make it look special in a way. And apparently it was really expensive back in the 80s because Kevin Eastman and Laird used it on TMNT. That was one of the things that, even when I look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm like, wow, this is just, people would call it raw, bad art. And I'm like, bro, no. Duotone was an interesting way to do art. And lots of artists used it, especially in the comic book industry. Ed Piskor apparently scanned duotone because you can't find it anymore. He used it digitally in this book to create art that had it, that he could layer over his pencils and inks. Now, kudos to Ed for two things. First off, the amount of work that went into an issue 1, I think it's like 68 pages or something. This is a banger of an opener. This is the way you want to come out with your new book. You know, nowadays comic books generally are 24 pages, 32 pages. Come out with this banger? Hey, that's cool in my book. Characters in here. When I think of the greats, you know, if I think of or even not the greats, but just people who would generally, like, passive comic book readers, they would think like, oh, Todd McFarlane on the Spider-Man, or Jim Lee on the X-Men, or Rob Liefeld on that. I'm just kidding. I know what Rob did. My point being is that when you think of creating new characters, when you think of drawing people in, especially for something like Red Room, those characters were created and the way they look, like right off the bat on the cover here, you have Mistress Pentagram, and you don't even know this guy's name. Clown Dude, upside down cross. It's already wicked. You're already sold. And that's the thing. Ed is an artist. He creates, right? He knows how to create good characters in art. My review of Red Room is that when you're creating as an artist characters and you do a good job, you're going to draw people in. Todd McFarlane did it on Spider-Man, Jim Lee X-Men, Rob Liefeld. Rob Liefeld did we all know what he did. Come on. Stop playing around. I'm kidding with you. Kidding. Also a little bit rambling because it's going to be tough to explain this. It's tough to explain it in the fact that I think Ed did a great job with coming out with a tight book, but then you follow it out with, the second Red Room, you got third Red Room, other like cover, you got 4, you got the A cover, you got his YouTube channel with Jim Rugg, you got the cartoonist kayfabe going on, which man, kayfabe. Know what I mean? Now, I'm not going to get hot on Ed for his writing. My point being is that he knew how to create amazing looking characters for this comic book. He knew what he wanted to do artistically, but when it came to writing... So the first issue, I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for you. As of this review, I think he's going into his second part of it, which there's a shortage run on paper because of COVID. But you can tell that it's not to its detriment at all in the comic book, where you feel like the writing is like lacking hardcore, like you're not questioning the writing too hard. But it definitely feels like somebody needs to improve one aspect of this comic book. And I gotta tell you, putting together a comic book from nothing all the way to publication by yourself, I can't even tell you what a task that is. It almost feels like if you went into doing it with like a 40-hour-a-week job, you'd never fucking finish the thing, or else you'd also finish the thing, but it would be years later. So Ed taking on all the bedroom, every corner of it, to squeeze himself into, and showing off his talents as an artist, fucking killed it. The other side of this, though, as I'm getting to the writing feels like there's not enough ground until like issue 3. Issue 3 is when you start finding out more about the outside world of the Red Rooms. And the Red Rooms themselves are, this thing on the dark web. The dark web is a place where you can get away with illegal shit, basically. Nobody knows what you're doing. They're unable to track it. It's a dark hole in the internet universe. So on the dark web, people are paying shit ton of money to see people kill other people on camera. As we find out in issue 1, there are these people who have basically dominated the dark web for this sort of thing. But they're against each other in a way where Mr. Pentagram, for instance, feels like she's not earning the profits that she's putting out the work for. It's almost kind of like the comic book industry in itself. You take on this grand piece of work and somehow you're not getting your due. You know, you're not making the total cut. And then there's a bunch of competition, you know, harboring the other side of the river of currency. So on the dark web, Mr. Pentagram is running her red rooms. And she's kicking ass, but she feels like all her killers are becoming second rate, basically. They need something fresh. They need something new. So they pull in this guy, chubby guy, and they find out he has a dark history, basically, of doing the same thing. He was, you know, killing people. But now he's connected to authority figures. He's working in a police station. He's got a daughter, lots of stuff. I'm not going to ruin the whole thing. And that's basically the first issue. You know, they bring him into the fold and he's a hit. You know, he's killing it. He's killing it. Wrestling, as it is with Jim and Ed on their channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe, which Kayfabe was the wrestling terminology for keeping up with your character no matter what happens. No matter if, like, an audience member would meet you after the show, you'd still be in kayfabe, brother. And you'd be in character. Because they would know that if you weren't in character after the show, then they wouldn't watch the channel later, right, on TV, and they'd be like, that's the Undertaker. He's actually a really nice dude. You just got to meet him. No, the Undertaker is the Undertaker. Like, these characters are putting on a kayfabe in front of the camera, which is the wrestling thing, and they're killing. You know, there's it does show like a actual like chat room. There's people commenting. Here's the issue with the writing, is that when I read those comments on the channel in the comic book, when the killers are killing people, in fact, all I can hear is Ed's voice. You know, I don't hear like a writer taking on other people's voices in a chat room. I hear like Ed thinking what would be funny in other people's voices in a chat room. So for Ed Piskor did say, though, you know, like, I'm doing a lot of studying, I'm reading a lot of whatever it was, and he's trying to grow as a writer, and that's perfectly fine with me. That's where I will give him a pass, because that's what you have to do, you know. And again, when we think of the comic book greats, like Frank Miller writing Daredevil, drawing Daredevil, you know, Todd McFarlane writing Spider-Man and drawing Spider-Man. Frank did it better, you know. Todd was a amateur writer, you know. He's still writing Spawn. Through the comic book, you get that sense through the first two issues. You're like, all right, this is really cool. Like, I like the idea. I dig the setup. I love the way the characters look. Obviously, Ed's art is killing it. especially with that duotone. But it's not till issue 3 when the actual writing seems to give you that money shot. You know, it actually gives you the finisher you need to kind of feel like you've been fulfilled by the match of the comic book. You know, I want to say when you go into this, and I'm not going to spoil the rest, there's obviously more issues that have come out since then, and I'm just going to tell you that it's not till issue 3 for me that this thing actually hits, and it hits in a way where it leaves you hanging still, and apparently what's coming next is supposed to continue in a different direction. It's almost like a Pulp Fiction thing, you know, except for you're not going to come back to that character. It doesn't feel like it. But you're not left completely unsatisfied. It just feels like Ed's putting in more into his art than his writing. And again, the writing isn't bad. It's just not what you're here for. So would I tell you to go pick up Red Room? Absolutely. But I would tell you for the art more than the writing. I myself have done plenty of Red Room art, just cause, for no reason in particular. I just love the way those characters look. I thought Ed killed it. I mean, when you're coming out with some character creations and you really have to wow people by their designs, I mean, he nailed it. Obviously, I respect Ed. I respect his hustle, along with Jim Rugg, and in further down the line, Tom Scioli. Those guys, you know, putting in the effort to not only gain an audience out of talking about art, but just comics history in general. I mean, how can you not respect them for that? But when we're talking about Red Room, yeah, there's room to grow. Ed can grow as a writer. There's nothing wrong with saying that as I review these comic books. But I hope you do pick them up. Obviously, Ed and Jim have their own channel called Cartoons Kayfabe. Go check it out. I love you. Oh, camera's over here.